Welcome to another edition of the Corner Booth Podcast from Greenspot Restaurant here in Montreal. I want to thank our sponsors today, the folks over at Empire Gold and Guaranteed Industries, for helping make this possible. Our guest tonight is Glenn Castanheira, who's the Executive Vice President of the Downtown Montreal Merchants Association. Did I get that right? It's a long title.
Executive Director.
Executive Director, okay.
Wow.
President possibly
Better.
One day. If
No,
there is.
well, I have a board. My chair is my president.
Okay.
Carrying the weight of the entire city
Yes,
on your shoulders.
yes.
So
Yeah.
you were here in the wake of a report that was talked about this week, and we'll get to that and a lot of other stuff, but when you see a headline like Downtown Montreal needs a new master plan or risks devolving into a spiral of devitalization, you're the downtown merchants guy, and I know you commissioned the study, so let's talk about it. How serious is this? Because that seems pretty serious.
The risk is very serious. Ironically, though, maybe not for the same reasons that we may think. Our downtown is performing exceptionally well. If I were to tell you, or if you were to, guess, when we talk about footfall in downtown, between Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, which are the three largest Canadian downtowns, where are we in the return to downtown? Now, let me tell you that I just got fresh data from this morning. Downtown Montreal is back at 93% of footfall pre-pandemic. Vancouver is at less than 70%, and Toronto at less than 50%.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to explain what footfall means exactly.
So footfall is how many people are downtown. So we have almost as many people downtown today, despite all the issues that we all know quite well, that we had pre-pandemic. And cities like Toronto, with a much stronger economy than we do, aren't even at 50% of the amount of people in their downtown that they had pre-pandemic.
But now the
I'm
other
guessing-
foot must fall, Glenn, because what you're not mentioning is the office buildings downtown. The return there has been not great.
Absolutely. We're at roughly, according to the Chamber of Commerce, 80% return to office. That doesn't mean 80% of people. It means 80% are back 1 to 3 days a week in average. But that's, again, I'll show you the positive. Keep in mind, even with over, let's say, 40% of workers aren't downtown right now, we're still at over 90%.
Yeah, which begs the question, who are those people? Are
And
they
that's what's
tourists, or-
amazing about our
Who are those
downtown.
people.
And very unique in North America. Our downtown isn't just a business district. It's not just offices. It's also that. We had roughly over 300,000 workers working downtown pre-pandemic, but it's also 130,000 students that are there every single day. It's 100,000 residents, which we haven't seen since the 60s. So many, right? The second strongest demographic growth in all of Canada is downtown Montreal.
Wow.
And then, of course, tourists, leisure tourists, but also business tourists. And business tourists, although they only...
Are the good tourists.
Exactly. They only represent roughly 40% of our tourists, yet 60% of spending. Because Montreal is renowned for its diverse economy. We have some of the best brains we all know about artificial intelligence. Well, thanks to our universities, McGill being the #1 Canadian university, and Concordia and Université de Montréal, we have some of the brightest minds. We have our economy, again, being diverse. If Toronto's Canada's largest financial district, we're Canada's second, but we're the largest tech center in Canada. We're the largest creative industry cluster in Canada. We have such a diverse economy that if one sector collapses, the other ones are holding. And I'll give you a great example of this, and I'll stop my rant at that point, but I hope that expresses how lucky we are. I just came back from Calgary last week. They called us in to help them build a new strategy to revamp downtown Calgary. Calgary, Canada's 4th largest downtown, has over 35% vacancy in its offices, which represents a decrease in property values. Now, remember this, of 60% drop in property values in its downtown. 60%, which translates in an explosion in residential taxes in the rest of the city. They are dead. And if you want a city that's easy to drive in and park in, that's Calgary. But the fact that they're dependent on gas and oil and there's nothing else to do downtown means that they're dead. So we're very lucky in that aspect. But despite all that luck, and that's where this report comes in, is that we're very lucky that we've known many other crises. We've come back from worse, 2 referendums. We all remember the Brinks. I wasn't there, but I've been told, and I remember that story of the Brinks emptying the Sun Life building. We lost everything we had, and we've rebuilt stronger than we were.
So
and that's why we're doing it.
As you describe this, I'm thinking to myself,
So what's the problem?
Where is the bad stuff? All I'm hearing is wonderful stuff about downtown. Where is the problem?
And the problem is that we're on borrowed time, because we have all these assets and we've really taken it for granted for a very, very long time. And that's what this report says, is that we've through the generations, we've built solid base for our downtown, and we've kind of let it go of being like, oh, downtown Montreal's doing well and Montreal's doing great. Let's focus on everything else. And we've begun treating downtown as any other borough or neighborhood in this city. You know, Montreal's known for its neighborhoods, but downtown isn't just another neighborhood. It has a specific role to play, and we've demonstrated that there isn't one entity responsible for downtown. Downtown's much larger than my territory that spreads from Atwater to St. Urbain and from Sherbrooke to Saint Antoine. It goes all the way to the Jacques Cartier Bridge, and it goes all the way to Old Montreal. And there's one person leading that. We see that today with the issues we have with construction, the issues we have with the marginalized population, the homeless population being preyed upon in our downtown and transformed into drug addicts by criminal organizations. We see it with the skyrocketing of property values and residential being unaffordable to live in our downtown, and so much more. And what we're saying is, unless we figure who or what can lead downtown and be responsible for downtown in the long run, as other cities have done, we are headed for disaster.
But don't we, but you know, when having grown up in this city, especially as a kid, I spent a lot of my youth in downtown Montreal. But I've noticed that a lot of the reasons that I used to go downtown have been eliminated. For instance, we'd go down to see movies. Now we're all watching movies on Netflix. I'd go downtown as a restaurant critic to go to restaurants. Then the restaurants left downtown Montreal. It's slim pickings downtown for restaurants. We'd go downtown to party and have fun. Now people are going, the plateau remains. So like a lot of the reasons we went downtown, and then the pandemic. So we were all used to, you know, and parking, construction, expense. I love downtown Montreal, but finding the reason to go downtown. It's also interesting that if I go to Toronto, I'll go to the museum, but if I'm in my own city, I won't. You know, we don't play tourists that often in our own city, too.
That's a really good question, and to your point, I came into my position in early 2021, late December 2020, started January 2021. I'll be very frank with you. I wasn't a big consumer of downtown. I've rediscovered
You're too young.
downtown. No, I used to go for hockey games,
Right.
F1, and shopping every once in a while. But
But shopping too. Huge reason we went downtown.
And now you can get most of those brands everywhere else.
And not even online, but also in shopping malls. You know, Royal Mount coming up, Rockland, you know, Distance.
Absolutely.
You know, it's a weird situation.
Which is why, and so to that point, as of 2021, we've noticed foot traffic skyrocketing in downtown and seeing the streets filled with people. And we started asking, but what are they doing here? The first question came into mind in March 2021. Let's remember, March 2021, there was still a curfew in effect. Restaurants were closed. Retailers were at capacity.
Festivals were canceled, right?
Festivals were canceled. And St. Catherine Street was packed with people. And we said, what are these people doing here? Let's survey them. And we couldn't, because public health prevented us from speaking to people in the street. So we did recent surveys this year, and here's the information we got. Surprisingly, most people are downtown because they like to have a good time. They like to go for a walk. They come for the experience, believe it or not.
Right.
And then the second reason is shopping. And then you wonder, but you can shop anywhere else and online. And then you put two and two together, it's the shopping experience that you have downtown. It's not just a mall, it's an ecosystem. And then the other reason is culture. We forget that downtown Montreal is North America's largest cultural cluster. So we have Le Musée des Beaux-Arts, which is the most frequented museum in Canada.
Wow.
Quartier des Spectacles, and so much more. And then I can go on and on and on. And that's the beauty of our downtown. There's the reasons we used to go there. And then I often say, people, I don't go downtown. Well, if you don't come downtown, somebody else is. Because there's something there. And it's quite unique. And I don't think we have enough time tonight to go into all the details. But that's why we're lucky to have diverse our downtown.
So let me backtrack here. This is not about it. We're going to point fingers here. And I know you say we need to do something. We can go back a few administrations, right? When things started to maybe deteriorate, nothing was done, and obviously the longer you wait, the worse it's going to get. So we look at downtown now. You brought up some of the things in the study, and I think it's worth pointing out that in the study, this wasn't conducted in a vacuum, right? They checked out cities across the world, from San Francisco to Taipei.
Yeah.
And what's a central theme from this study that you think can be applied here?
The common denominator we found in all downtowns is that they have an efficient method of governance. Now, this is not sexy at all, and that's why pretty much nobody likes talking about this. But when you look at, a city that tackled cleanliness or safety or construction, there's a solution that was put in place, but when you dig deeper, you realize it's because they have either the power to do so, or they have a structure in place that can actually put it together. That means having an adequate, not just municipal powers, but an adequate financing and levers to actually control the territory, which we don't have. And let me give you a great example.
Wait a second, I'm going to stop you. You seem like you're making the case for self-government for downtown.
Oh, absolutely. That is the conclusion that we take. The key takeaway we take from that is that our downtown needs a special status to have it properly governed. You cannot manage an international area, because that is what downtown is, where millions of people flock to every single week. The same way you manage Plateau Mont-Royal or Huntsic.
Right.
I'm sorry, that's...
But what a major problem we have in this province is the government doesn't really care about Montreal because it doesn't need Montreal. It wins elections on the basis
provincial government.
The provincial government not having to pay much heed to Montreal. And as long as that situation exists, I don't know how it's going to get any better.
That is a true concern that we have as well. I will say that beyond politics and partisan, and we've all seen the campaign that happened, I have the chance of working directly with ministers and their staff, and I can confirm that we have strong allies in Quebec.
Where?
At the Ministry of Economy.
Okay.
And
They don't
at the
have much
Ministry
choice.
of Finance.
I mean, they can't ignore Montreal completely.
Well, it's the economic engine.
and that's my point. There's a pragmatic way of looking at things that, and I often say this in my meetings with my Quebec vis-a-vis, which is, you cannot say you are a nationalist and spit on your economic and intellectual and cultural powerhouse that is your downtown. There isn't, and they recognize this, there isn't a single nation in the world that doesn't have a strong metropolis. And I often like to remind people, who would know anything about Catalonia if there wasn't Barcelona?
Right.
And Quebec is a strong nation, a powerful province that has influence around the world, and downtown Montreal is the fruits of the Quiet Revolution. And I like to remind that to people I deal with in Quebec.
I want to pick up on this because Bill's right? We know how we've been treated provincially up until now. Even recently, up until the last election, Francois Legault talked about, it's important we focus on Quebec City. So with respect to self-governance, do you need that power from the provincial government, or can you go to the municipal administration and say, hey, I understand the mayor, now elected mayor, is also the mayor of the Ville-Marie borough, but we believe we should have our own self-governance here. Give us the money, let us do what we want. Is that what you're saying?
So that's the next step, and it's too soon, and I really don't want to just avoid the question. The truth is, we don't know exactly what that governance should look like, and that's the next step. However, I, with the information we have and the knowledge that we have, I doubt that the city alone can give us those powers. The cities in Quebec are not equipped, and all mayors say this. The Union des Municipalités du Québec say this. The Canadian Federation of Municipalities say this. Cities do not have the powers they require in Canada, and even less in Quebec. So I
But
doubt
you sound like
Montreal
you're
will.
hopeful now with a new minister. So Pierre, in this case, Pierre Fitzgibbon, minister from Montreal, says he lives here, he knows the city well. You actually sense a change?
I sense there is
Too soon?
too soon to tell. I mean, I don't want to speak for Mr. Fitzgibbon, obviously, but I feel that, working with a pragmatic team, we consider ourselves to be pragmatic leaders as well. We should find a pragmatic solution that works, and that's what we bet on.
The Corner Booth podcast is brought to you in part by Guaranteed Industries. They are a Lennox premier dealer. They can take care of all your heating or cooling needs, residential, industrial, or commercial. GuaranteedIndustries.com or call them at 514-342-3400. They are a Lennox premier dealer. So Bill and I would like to jump on your back now. I've done this with you before when we've talked on the radio. If you drive into downtown Montreal, your biggest problem is you can't get to downtown Montreal. And if you're lucky enough to get there, you can't find any place to park
And
your
it's
car
going to get
on the street. It is
way
gonna get
worse with the
So,
La Fontaine Tunnel, the REM, and
You and I
everything
have
else.
talked about this before on different occasions, and I've said, why can't we? And by the way, it's worth pointing out, a lot of the parking lots that used to be downtown are gone. They've all become they've been
Condos.
developed into
Skyscrapers,
condos.
yep.
So we've lost all those parking spots. And, I
And
know-
added more people.
Yeah, and I know in this report, parking is one of the issues that's pointed out. How do we fix that?
So let's start with the premise of, the issue of driving and parking downtown. And I'll always remember my grandfather on this, which is we're talking about how Saint Laurent Boulevard evolved, and every generation says it's gone to crap. I remember my grandfather telling me that you can't drive downtown, and that was in the 80s. And I remember
That's 'cause
seeing
he didn't
reports.
drive. It's not the same thing.
He had a Volvo station wagon. I remember it quite clearly. But fact is, it's always been a problem to drive and park downtown. Let's start with that. Second premise is, I dare anyone to name me one downtown worth mentioning. One downtown in the world worth mentioning where it is easy to drive and park.
Impossible.
Impossible.
But they have park, like you go to New York City, I agree, nowhere to park, but they've got tons of garages.
There you go.
All over
there
the
you go.
place.
It's basically and so
It's car friendly.
it's efficient.
Parking
Friendly is a big word.
Parking friendly, yes.
Friendly is a big word because it's a honking festival, and you feel like either someone will kill you or you will
But-
kill
Yeah,
With
someone.
that aside,
But
But that aside, there's a pragmatic way of treating cars.
You'll find parking.
And we're very late.
Garages,
Yes,
yeah.
you'll pay for it, but at least you'll find it. And that's where we perform poorly. So the solution, we believe, resides in mutualization. And I'm sorry, I have a hard time saying mutualizing our parking infrastructure. We have downtown over nearly 50,000 off-street parking spots. 50,000. Most of these being used exclusively for office workers, and that already pre-pandemic were almost empty evenings and weekends. So today, with even less office workers being downtown, we're saying, why don't you render them available to the public? And when we speak to property owners, they're open to that. When we speak to parking operators, they're open to that. And the city's open to that. But it has failed so far because, back to what the report says, poor governance. There isn't the right leadership. When the city knocks at a property owner and say, hey, we want to use your parking, the property owner say, who the heck are you to tell me? I mean, it's a private parking. Leave me alone. In the cities where this has worked, it's a public-private partnership led by a third party that can work as a whatever makes the mayonnaise work is that entity that's able to jump from private to public sector.
But this
together.
leads us
That's
to
where
the next
solution is.
problem. Trying to get to
getting
those places.
downtown.
And I mean, one of the things your report addresses an issue that I've been on for a long time is the uncoordinated construction site. The city says, well, we're only responsible for 30%.
Yeah.
Then the levels of government, well, we're responsible, and the office towers, well, they're responsible. Condo construction. But there is no coordination. Someone has to take charge because it's chaos. I live like a downtown, and I mean it's fine because I can walk around. I don't know why anybody in the world, I wouldn't drive downtown, why anybody in the world would come from the West Island or South Shore
And
or
it's
Laval.
The city's addressed that. The city's admitted that's a problem. I heard the mayor say it over
Yeah.
and over again. Where's the theoretical mobility squad? Have you seen anyone on this squad, like in real life?
So I have. I've seen them.
They exist.
They do exist. I can
It
tell
could have
there's
been
not
worse,
enough of
Aaron.
them.
Yeah.
There's not enough of them. So much so that we've just created our own brigade that we call in French les déconneux. And their job, amongst other things, they just started, is to identify orphan cones or call the city, take them aside, and hide them in a corner and have somebody pick them up. And there's a great example. If you drive on St. Catherine today, and I'm furious today about this, there's one crane on St. Catherine next to what used to be Super Sex because there was a huge fire there and they're changing on top of the Five Guys building.
I wouldn't know where that is.
In front of the Eaton Center for everybody
oh, yes.
else.
Okay, Eaton Center, yeah.
And one crane. And I counted them, 53 orange cones, 28 no parking signs, and I think 12 big barricades for a street that's one way. There's no parking on the darn street, and there's only one lane. And that is because we have ridiculous bylaws that are written by the MTQ. This is what the report says as well. That doesn't distinguish a secondary road in the middle of the eastern townships, where 30 people drive per day, to St. Catherine Street, where 300,000 people circulate every day, and that's infuriating.
How do you change that?
Back to what the report says: proper governance. The city itself can't fix it, and even if the city
So who
could,
can?
it'll only be portion. You need to give the right centralized power, and that's my opinion. We need to. I know the Chamber of Commerce is coming with a report in December, where they're digging this even deeper, and I'm very excited to see what they're going to say. But I strongly believe it has to do with centralizing powers. If you look at New York's a good example. The Port Authority of New York controls everything that happens in Lower Manhattan.
Yeah.
Everything. And sometimes it looks like crap, but it is coordinated.
Yeah.
Because you have a master power in the center. I think we need something similar.
No orange cones either.
You know, you
Rarely, but it's not perfect, but it's better.
You brought up something really interesting, and I guess when you stop and think about it, you said there's 50,000 indoor parking spots in downtown that don't get utilized because there's a lack of communication. And I wonder, when you drive downtown, if you didn't know that you could park in Place Montreal Trust or in Place Ville Marie or at the Lexus Neon, because there is no coordinated program to let people know. I'm sure people would do it. Where do you, why is that even a provincial decision? Why can't you just go and say and do
the
it?
city can do something about it, not tomorrow, but quite quickly. And a good example of that is what we did with the taxi industry. To me, it's the perfect comparison. Let's look at the problems with parking downtown. Even if you find one, find one. And if you do find one, can you communicate? Does the person speak either French or English is one issue? Will you get a receipt? How many of them still require cash only? And the other one is, what's the signage? And do you even feel safe here? Because either they open, they close, the price changes.
Yeah.
Make a strict rule on that. Make it like the taxi industry, that you have a uniform signage. So that when you drive downtown, and you've all seen that in Europe, right? They all have this similar signage for parking. New York is similar as well. Make that standard. And people will flock to it. And if you don't give a receipt, you lose your permit. If you don't take credit cards, you get a fine. If you don't stay open till the schedule you said, you get a fine and we'll shut you
You're
down.
preaching to the choir here. I love everything that you're saying, but at the end of the day, we've been talking about this for so long, nothing has changed.
But-
Are you not optimistic or pessimistic? These are great ideas. What's going to happen?
I'm pessimistically optimistic.
No, that doesn't work.
But frankly, I'm cautiously optimistic because I really think that this pandemic has reminded us how fragile and important downtown is. So I think we have a window of opportunity before we forget again, because we will forget. No matter how many license plates says "Je me souviens," we will forget of how close we came to disaster.
The Corner Booth Podcast is brought to you in part by Empire Gold, paying the most for your collectibles. And remember, at Empire Gold, you get paid right on the spot. And nobody pays more for your gold or silver than Empire. Online, empiregold.ca.
I think there's something important too when we talk about downtown, especially if you look at cities like Paris and London. And I spent a lot of time in Vienna. And I've written about how there's parking in Vienna, but it's $35 an hour. And the thing is that if I look at my kids, the next generation, my kids would never. They don't even want to drive. We also have to think that in the future, maybe the problems that we have and we see will change because things will change downtown. You know, my kids think when streets are pedestrian streets, it's great, and I'm like, I can't get to where I want to go. So I think with the change of generations, the city will have to change, because even if I go downtown and I can get there and I can't park, the traffic is unbelievable, especially because of the construction, that a lot of it has to be done. But I do think with the next generation, they have a different attitude towards cars. I mean, I still go everywhere in my car. It's, you know, I don't go downtown because of the car. My kids go down because one thing is that the metro system to get downtown is excellent. The buses to get downtown are excellent. So it really is a problem for people with cars. But most people are getting downtown by metro. You know, who goes to a hockey game in their car? There's a metro station right there.
I love that point, Leslie, because, you know, I knew we were going to talk about parking, and I'm answering questions on how to fix it. But let's be very, very clear. Let's say we fix the parking problem tomorrow and the traffic problem tomorrow. It will not save downtown.
There'll just be more cars.
And to your point, back to the surveys, when we look at the irritants that people have when they come, what do they hate the most? The things drivers hate most is parking and driving. But when we ask these same drivers what they love most about coming downtown is the experience. The sidewalks on St. Catherine are wide enough. Yeah. I can walk and enjoy myself downtown. So the top priority, believe it or not, is not parking. It is experience. It needs to be clean,
cleanliness,
safe,
no graffiti
beautiful,
in our beautiful city.
Which is another issue.
Is covered in tags
that's
and
every
graffiti.
city in the world.
Oh, not as bad. You spoke about
It
Vienna,
is,
which
I've
is a
seen
great
it in
example.
Rome. I've seen it in a million places. And how did they even allow this? I don't even know how you solve that
Unbelievable.
problem.
And there is one solution, which is part of the report as well. We're one of the only cities in Canada where commercial landlords can do whatever they want. And let me start by saying problematic landlords represent maybe less than 5% of our portfolio in our downtown. Most landlords downtown are really good. We're lucky. But you only need one slumlord to affect everybody. And so if I tell you, you know, most of our listeners who live in the suburbs know that you're not allowed to let your grass grow more than 6 inches, right? That's the truth in most suburbs. But in downtown Montreal, where the taxes are the most expensive in all of Canada, it's the top area. You can do whatever you want. You can literally let your building rot to the ground, catch
And a lot
fire,
of them are.
and they are.
They are.
And you start by doing what other cities do. Cities like Chicago, it is illegal to leave a graffiti on your building longer than 30 days.
Right.
And if you do, you get a $5,000 fine per day.
But graffiti also, I was told by Luc Ferrandez that it's that the judges are letting the kids who are doing the tagging and spray painting off with nothing, like a warning. And they're I mean, once a warning, twice $250, three $500. No, they're just letting them go. Because if you look at the graffiti in the city,
It's tags.
Yes, it's tags. It's not beautiful graffiti, you know? And the thing is that if you really drive around and look, it's never been as bad.
Well, look at the Turcotte interchange.
Never been as bad.
Perfect example. But that's the broken window effect, okay? The real solution is, the only real solution is keeping it clean. The cleaner it is, the cleaner it stays.
Yeah.
The dirtier it is, the dirtier
Clean
it
and
is.
safe is what everybody wants.
We are going to run out of time, so I don't know if you were as optimistic as I was coming in.
I have a solution.
I'm more pessimistic now after hearing all this stuff than I was
Glenn,
when
I
we
have
started.
a solution. Why don't you run for mayor?
You would hate me if I ran for mayor.
Not necessarily.
You'd be surprised.
No, and that, you know, I sympathize with mayors, the current one, the past ones. I love and hate them all because they don't have the power to do what needs to be done. And if they did what needed to be done, you would all hate them, and me included, because it needs to get worse before it gets better. We're talking
How
about
much
traffic.
worse?
Well, you're talking about traffic. You know, we got into this mess because we didn't want to do reserved bus lanes. We didn't want bike lanes. We didn't want to invest in public transit. We wanted more highways. We wanted them to stay free. And we thought that everybody can have a car. I used to live in Kirkland. I saw Kirkland get built. It was built for cars.
Yeah, when
And
one
it
person
failed
in every
miserably.
car.
I became a man at 16 because I had a car. and it failed miserably. I go back and see my friends every blue moon in the West Island. I can't believe what a disaster has happened there. And there's no cyclists blocking roads.
Now we're dumping on Kirkland. Here come the letters. Okay, look, we have to wrap. I did want to ask one thing, and I know this came up a while ago in the last administration. What is going to happen to St. Catherine Street? Is it going to become a pedestrian-only street? What's the plan?
Good question. So I strongly believe that it's only a matter of time before St. Catherine Street becomes a pedestrian street, at least during the summer months. And proof of that is go look at Quartier des Spectacles between Saint-Laurent and de Bleury. It's been pedestrian permanently for the past 2 years.
Yeah, who's for that? Who's for that? Are you guys for that?
Yeah, I would have no
We will
problem
get
with
there,
that.
but there's many ingredients, like a great recipe, Leslie. There's many key ingredients that are necessary to get there,
Right.
And you see it at Quartier des Spectacles.
You sure you're not
can't
running
just
for
close
mayor?
it. Oh no, I'm sure.
You just went to Leslie and you used that old, it's just like a great red. Wow, that's
Did I? Thank
well
you.
done. Well done.
Because pedestrian streets can be fantastic. I went to Zagreb in
Yes.
Croatia. Oh my God. The terraces, the joie de vivre, everybody's
As long
out
as you
in
can
the
park
street.
on a side street, that's fine.
Well, that's the thing. It's not magical, and it's not just parking. You can't just close the street and say, "Aha, voila! I've fought cars." And no, you need public art, green, animation. You need storefronts. There's a lot of ingredients there that needs to be.
And now that
we're
Super
almost
Sex
there.
is gone,
clearly there's
we
not
have to
mu-
make up for it,
Yeah,
right?
there's not much to be done apparently.
Oh, and we need to talk about trucks
Wow.
and deliveries.
Oh,
a huge issue.
that
We're
is
not
a
going
huge
to
issue,
because
right?
we're out of
Oh,
time.
I wish.
Glenn, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate the time.
Thanks for being nice with me. I was expecting
Yeah.
worse.
Well, next
we
time,
do
we're
the
gonna
not
do-
nice part after we're off air.
When you're in office.
That's this edition of the Quarter Booth Podcast from Greenspot Restaurant. Thanks again.